And again, it's a privacy thing now with Teams. Everyone's being recorded. So here we go. I'm just making sure that the program is recording. Yes, so it's now recording, just so everyone's aware of that. And then I'm going to switch over to share my Revit screen. Here we are. Okay, so hopefully now you can all see Revit. And I'm trying to make it a bit of a design here rather than just the sort of boring demonstration space that I had before. So I've just changed the walls there over on the left to make them a bit more interesting. I've got a design idea in mind. It's still very early days, but again, hopefully you can all see that change that I've made. But if you're still getting annoyed by the opening in the stairs not being correct, don't worry, that's really annoying me as well. I'm going to make that change and fix that as the thing that I can show you once I get this into Photoshop. I want to update the render that I brought from Revit, and of course bring that across to Photoshop after setting up some initial settings in Photoshop. Okay, so this was set up previously, as you all saw last time. That is all ready to render. Now, I've been a bit stupid. I should have sent this to the cloud earlier as well. I didn't, but what I might do is use what I had previously, and again, we can look at using the updated version when that comes through. So all I've done there is bring up the rendering dialog box and hit render. And if it wasn't clear last week, I didn't show how to make perspective views because we had already covered that previously. So if you are still unsure about that, make sure you've had a look at the videos that I added. Well, they were already on Myrtle previously, but they were hard to find. So I've added 2 new items in resources to make it easier to get to those earlier videos that we did for this space. And so again, that might help some of you who are still looking at going over some of the things that we covered in class leading up to last week. Okay, so you can see that that's rendering away. Maybe it looks a bit dark, but remember, I can use the exposure controls to compensate for the amount of light. So you can probably see it's still on 11%, but I'll just give it another minute or another few seconds because it usually just jumps right to the end once it gets to this point. If it doesn't finish in a few seconds though, I might just stop it, and that's a good thing to know. You can stop the render at any point and it will keep what you've got. So if I press stop now, you can see what's on the screen. It's actually pretty close to the final render anyway. But you can see there, it is jumping ahead now, and I might just give it another few seconds to see if it finishes. If I didn't have all these programs open, it would have been finished already. I've got about 10 programs open at the moment on my little laptop. So I'll give it another few seconds, otherwise I might stop it. And this is only on draft. So if you're going to use the teapot render, I'd recommend that you don't go much higher than draft. So you can see there, even on draft, the results are reasonable. I think I will stop this, so I don't have to wait for that to finish. Okay, and then if you go to medium, of course, it'll be slightly better quality. But then you'll find if you go to high, it uses a completely different group of rendering settings, and you'll get a very different result. So normally I wouldn't recommend that unless you've got a lot of time to set that up. It's quite difficult to use. And the same with best. So high and best use very different render setups to draft and medium. So if you want to go higher than medium, I'd recommend using the cloud. Right, so I'm going to export now and make sure I've got this image saved. So that's done. Notice also that I've given my view a better name. So that's really important. When you have lots of perspective views, here I've only got a few, but when you've got a lot, and I've probably told you before, in big projects that I've worked on, often I'll have dozens of 3D views. It becomes really confusing if you don't give them meaningful names. So just try and keep on top of that and make your life much easier. So I've exported my view. You can also choose Save to Project, but that's really just as a backup, and it doesn't give you everything you want anyway. I'm also going to try another option. So I'm just going to change this to transparent, the style, and I'll actually come back and hit render on that in a moment. But before I do, I'm going to close this and then also set it off to the cloud so we can compare the difference. So that's odd, the render stayed there. That's really weird. But if I zoom, yeah, there we go. Normally it doesn't stay there. Okay, so then now I'll go to the view tab and then rendering cloud. So notice I'm already logged in. Okay, so you need to be logged in up the top right there to use the cloud render. I'll just see, it looks like a question's come up. Sorry, just checking that. I know, so it's just recording. Good, okay, so yeah, but of course, keep asking questions if you aren't sure about anything. So again, on the view tab, I'll go to rendering cloud. So I showed you this last week. Again, normally here, I'll just tick do not show this message so it doesn't keep coming up. It's just information. There's nothing you can do here. I've just left that so that I can show people what happens when it comes up. And again, so it's just information for you to read. Here, all you can do is hit continue. But then on the next page, you do need to put in some settings. So if you remember from last time, generally, I'll just set the render quality to final. It only costs an extra credit. And then the image size, I think a good all-round setting is large. That works well for a lot of things. So that's a good generic or general setting. So final for render quality, image size to large, then just hit render, and that sends it off to Singapore. So here I'm going to hit continue in background so that I can then bring up the render dialog again, but I'm going to save the file first. Even though I haven't really done much here, I'm just in that habit. Whenever I'm doing rendering, I'll save almost at every step because especially in the past, it used to crash a lot when you do these things that are pretty intensive. So, so here again, I've put up the rendering dialog box so I can set another render going while I'm working in Photoshop. And all I've done there is change the background to transparent. So I can show you what that does. So I'll hit render and I'll just let that start. And then I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. Okay, there we go. So that's started. And so now I'll actually just let you see how it starts. Notice how now we've got this checkerboard pattern coming through the windows. So that's what the transparency option does. So in other words, through the windows, we'll have a cutout where we can add our own background. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to Photoshop. So I'll have to go back to Teams and there's a new message. Sorry, I missed that. Love the floor. Yeah. Oh, look. I mean, I want to improve it, but yeah, at least it's. I don't mind shiny timber in renders, so I know why you like it because it does look nice having the reflective floor. It gives the space a bit more depth or something. But I'll probably want to be a bit lighter. But yeah, I know what you mean. Reflective floors can look nice in renders. I think in real life they're a bit. They can be a bit ordinary. But yeah, I know what you mean. So yeah, so again, I'll stop sharing Revit, and now I'm just going to switch over and share Photoshop. Okay, so hopefully now you can all see Photoshop. I'm just scrolling through some thumbnails there so you can see some of the things I've been working on. And so now I'm simply going to open, my toolbar's just floating. I'm just going to dock that. Maybe it's because this is weird. And yeah, so I'm just going to go and open anyway. So I go File, Open, or click on the Open button, same thing. And then find the file that I just saved. And where is it? So it's in here. Yeah. Okay, so that's not it. Here it is. Perspective Interior Level 2 is what I named it. Okay, so there it is in Photoshop. I didn't adjust the exposure in Revit, but that's okay because I want to show you how to do that in Photoshop. So, okay, so I'm just going to ask you a question. So, when you were looking at Photoshop last year with Saul, I know he showed you this, but do many of you remember using adjustments under the image menu? Oops, sorry, we don't want that. So I'll just do that again. So image and then adjustments. So do you all remember using adjustments from the image menu? Or let me know if you remember doing them a different way. Does anyone remember that? No? Yes. No one can hear? You do remember? Good, good. Okay, so that's really helpful. Okay, so if you do remember using adjustments under the image menu, okay, so of course you can keep doing that, and I'll just show you one. So if we go to maybe even just brightness contrast, the first one, then you can see the result as you drag the slider. As long as you've got the preview option ticked, you can of course then see it or see a preview. All right, but I'm going to show you why adjustments also can cause problems if you use them from the image menu. So I'm going to take this brightness right up. So I was trying to make the image brighter, so I've done that. And then I'll go back and I've realized, of course, now that's a bit too bright. So I'll go back to adjustments, brightness contrast, and then I'll take the brightness back down. Now that one, it's actually not doing, I'm going to exaggerate the effects. So I'm going to go up even higher. Right, so just pretend I've gone a bit crazy and I've made it super bright for some reason. But then I'll go back now, and so I'm exaggerating the effect just so that you can see what I'm talking about. So again, under image and then brightness contrast again, and then I'll take the brightness down. And can you see how I'm not getting the original image back? Okay, and so there's a good reason for that. It's because the colors are clamped. So that means when you get to white, white is all the colors. So remember, mix red, green, and blue, you get white when you're working with light. And that's the way your eyes work and cameras work, and so that's the way we see. And so again, you need to understand that all the colors together make white when you work with light. And so when we get to white, then the colors that previously had different color values, like this area where you can see it's all, that ugly big white splodge on the walls, it's got nowhere to or nothing to come back from. So if we go and keep reducing the brightness, it will, of course, make it darker, but it can't get that color information back because it's essentially lost it when the colors were taken up to full white. It lost that detail. So I'm going to go back to the beginning under the window menu. I'm going to bring up history and then go back to the way it was. Not by reversing my steps, but by undoing, essentially. And that's what the history panel in Photoshop does for you. So instead of using adjustments from the image menu, I'm going to show you under the layer menu, you have adjustment layers. It's generally a better way of making adjustments than just using adjustments under image. So have any of you used adjustment layers before? Or not?
No.
So a lot of people work it out because you find if you look at tutorials on YouTube, they'll usually start with adjustment layers. It's one of the more, I don't want to say basic things, but it's something that is very common in Photoshop. So again, under layer, you go to new adjustment layer, and then you have all the same options as you have under adjustments on the image menu. Well, nearly all the same options. So again, layer, new adjustment layer, and then I'll just use brightness contrast. And then I'll click OK. I'm just going to keep the name that's come up. And now you can see I've got the brightness contrast slider in this dedicated panel. So I can bring the brightness right up. Right, and then I'll show you my layers now, and you can see it's added in this extra layer called brightness contrast above my background. And so then if I need to bring the brightness back down, I don't go back and make more adjustments or add more adjustments. All I need to do is go over to the layers and double click on the little icon. So it's that little circle with the dark and the light. So you double click on that little circle and that will give you back the controls. So you can always bring the brightness back and you don't lose information, essentially. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to store our original layer, keep that there unaffected, so the background is still underneath. I can even disable the brightness contrast. So if I decide that's just getting in the way, so I can click on the little eye next to that and disable it altogether. And if I decide that I want it back, it's easy to bring it back. So that's a parametric workflow. So in other words, we've got parameters so we can keep adjusting rather than what's called a linear workflow where, again, we lose information as we make changes. Yes, but yeah, so yeah, just checking the messages. Great, that's spot on. Yep. So again, I'll go back and add some more. And so again, onto the layer menu. And then, so remember I said you can adjust the exposure in Photoshop. So under, again, adjustment layers, you have exposure. It's very similar to brightness contrast, but it's better for photograph images. Using the exposure control, I can make it brighter. And so you have some other great options with the exposure option, like gamma correction. And that's a really good one for bringing back detail that you may lose when you adjust the exposure. So you can see that I brought the exposure up so that the image is brighter, but I'm starting to lose details where the sunlight's coming through those windows. So you see then with the gamma correction, we can sometimes get that back. It doesn't always do exactly, or won't do all of it, but you can definitely use that sometimes to correct issues that you have with exposure. I wouldn't recommend using offset very much. Offset actually works a bit like brightness contrast. Sometimes it's useful, but that's essentially clamped again. So in other words, all the colors are moving together, which is not so useful. And you can see when I go too high, it looks a bit like we've got a film over the image or something. So I don't usually use offset very much. I usually just leave that on 0. But gamma correction and exposure I use all the time. And so I'll go and put some others on. So I'm going to bring my layer panel up and you'll see down the bottom of layers, you've got some other ways of adding adjustment layers. Click on the little icon at the bottom, the one again with the circle with the darken the light, and you've got all the same options there to add adjustment layers. So some other good ones, levels, really useful. So with levels, you should use the graph area at the top. Don't worry about that slider at the bottom from black to white. That's for your overall output levels. It's not so useful, but the graph at the top is really useful. So I can use that to bring down the brighter levels, which actually will make it brighter. It's bringing that bright level into a lower range, if that makes sense. So we bring that down to increase the brightness, or at the other end, we bring that bottom level up to increase the darkness. And that is good for getting more contrast. That's really what levels is working with. And then the middle one is, of course, the midtones. And really balance your renders. So you'd be surprised how much of an improvement levels can make with certain. It's helpful, but it's more important with images that have a lot of contrast. You'll see levels helps you a lot. So really useful one. And again, so I can decide if I want that or not. So you can see that's without levels and that's with. So without, again, now it looks like it's got a film over it. With the levels, you can see it's tightened up a bit and a bit more defined and again, essentially more contrast. So then coming back to some of the other adjustment layers, you have, we'll skip curves. Curves is actually really good as well. It's similar to levels though, but a bit more advanced. We can skip that for now though. And we've looked at exposure. And then you have vibrance, which again is useful sometimes, but I'm going to skip that and go straight to hue saturation, which is again one of those essential ones you should all know. So saturation is the amount of color. So if it's too colorful, you can use that to reduce the color. If we go all the way to the left, that's a grayscale now. All the way to the right, that's, overblown the colors, but just so you can see they're the extremes. And then it's probably on that somewhere in between. So if we could make it, if we want the colors to be emphasized more, we can always bring that up. And that's similar to what vibrance gives you as well. But to bring that it'll just sometimes is helpful if you think the colours are too colourful. The one at the bottom sometimes is useful as well, but again, it's a bit like brightness contrast. That lightness option, again, it's clamped, so all the colours come up evenly, which personally I don't find is all that useful, but I know in some cases people do seem to like that one as well. The one at the top is probably the most difficult to use, but again, it's sometimes useful. That's your hue slider, but that's the overall hue for the whole image. Hue means color. So if we change this, it's going to change the relative color values of all of the colors. So you can see there, everything's changing. Can completely change your color palette. So again, bit of a difficult one to use. Sometimes it's helpful, but again, probably for your renders, it's not as useful as some of those other options. Going back to the layers, and then so the only other one I'm going to show you now is photo filter. Okay, so before I do that, I want to go back and increase or change my saturation just so that this is a bit clearer, and that's again going to show you why adjustment layers are so useful. So again, you can see in my layers, it's still there, hue saturation, so I'll bring that one up. I'm just going to make it a bit more saturated so that what I do with the photo filters is a bit clearer. So I'll go back now to my photo filters from adjustment layers. And so then you can see that the first one, there's a warming filter, and you've got 3 of those. So warming filters, of course, make it warmer or more orange. You can see there from the thumbnail, that color is what the gel is over the top of the render. It's basically a filter or a colored glass overlay. If you've never dealt with photography, this is something that photographers used to carry around and stick over their cameras. And so then a cooling filter, you can see clearly puts a blue filter, and that can correct textures that are too warm. So in this case, if we go back and let's bring up the layers, I'm just going to disable that so you can see that's without the cooling filter. We've got again blue tinge to everything. It's probably a bit too, but no problem. I can go then and adjust my adjustment layer, and I'm going to try another one. So the blue, the pure blue photo filter is actually not as strong as those cooling filters, and I actually like that one a lot. I use that all the time. And then you've got deep blue as well, which is essentially another cooling filter. Oh, that's deep red, sorry, deep blue. And so they'll all correct renders that are a bit too warm, and I think mine was a bit too warm initially. Now it's a bit too cool, so I'm going to go back to just plain blue. But even then, it's still maybe a little bit too cool because the walls now are starting to look blue when they should really be white. So you've got then the density, which is essentially the strength of that photo filter. So if you can see now, the walls don't look quite as blue. The ones still at the back there still do have quite a lot of blue in them because they're getting the sky color as well. But you can see these other walls that aren't getting as much of the sky are not so blue anymore. Okay, so just to compare that, so again, that's without the photo filter. That's with. It's a subtle thing, but hopefully you can see now that those walls that were looking a little bit orange or a bit creamy, now with the photo filter a bit closer to neutral. So that's a really useful adjustment to make. Photo filters are used all the time. So I've made all those changes. Now what I'm going to do is just quickly check. I'm not going to bother showing you my screen, but I'm going back to Revit now just to save the updated render that's been going in the background. That's finished now, of course, so I'll just save that. And then I might send another one to render on medium quality, so I'll just send that as well. And then I'm going to go to the cloud. So if you missed that last week, it's on the View tab. You'll see the Render Gallery option, which takes you straight to the cloud. And actually, I'm going to have to switch to share that screen with you. So I'll just have to change windows. In fact, I will show you in Revit. in case you've forgotten. Oh, and I've gone and shared Photoshop. That was clever. Sorry about this. Okay, maybe I'll just share my desktop. Yeah, I'm going to share my desktop actually. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so you can see there, hopefully now I'm showing my whole desktop. So the only difference, I've got Photoshop still open, but you'll see then all the icons of my taskbar should be up on your screen now. Just let me know if you can't see that. Now, when I switch back to Revit, hopefully you can see that straight away. And I'm just going to go to Render Gallery. And with any luck by now, the render that I sent, bad network quality. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a message from Teams. It's struggling a bit, I think, with everything I've got open. I don't know, is there much of a delay in the, can you notice, any of you, that there's much of a lag between what I'm showing you and what's coming up on your screen? Seems a lot better today than it was last week. But let me know if you think there's an unreasonable lag, or if it's freezing altogether. Definitely let me know. No, it seems pretty good. Okay, good. Okay, so I've got the Myrtle sheet open. Now this is odd. It's rendering. Oh, that's very odd. Okay, I've seen this happen, but not for a while. It's rendered the wrong view. That's very strange. Okay, so I'll go back and I'll just send it again. That's all I can do. Maybe I didn't check the view, or maybe even I changed it without realizing. So when you send it to render in the cloud, there is a choice of the 3D view that you render. I don't know, I didn't think I did, but I maybe didn't check that. So all I can do again is send that to render again in the cloud. Okay, but that's okay. So while that's happening, I'll get the one that I've just saved from the Revit render. But before I do, I'll send the medium quality render off as well, so we can look at that in a minute. Okay, so now I want to bring that new render into Photoshop with the changes that I've just made. But maybe to make it a bit clearer why this this sort of setup I'm showing you is going to help you, I might just make a couple more changes here before I bring in the change from Revit. So I'm going to get some people. Now, I'm just going to show you, if you are looking for people in Google, just search for something like cutout people. Right, doing an image search, and you'll find lots of them. Right, so I wouldn't recommend trying to do it in Revit. Some of you might have seen that you can add entourage. Have most of you found the entourage people in Revit? Or has anyone found those? They're okay, so if you found them, that's a good thing. They're useful sometimes. So maybe we'll look at that. Sounds like a lot of you, or many of you, haven't seen those. Right, so just so you're aware. Okay, so I'll come back to this one later. Okay, so you do have people in Revit, of course, when you go to place a component. If you go to load family, you'll see in the entourage folder, you have RPC male and RPC female. So I'll start with RPC female. And so then you can see this one is seated. Hopefully you can see that. So I'm just going to see if there's a message. Yes, good. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, good. If you found them, that's good. They are useful for certain things. So then if I look over in properties, you can see there are actually 6 different women's names over there. So we have 6 people in that RPC family, RPC female family. So Kathy, she's standing one with a suitcase. Let's stick her over here. And then Cynthia's the seated one, which I won't bother with. Florence is another standing one. She's the businesswoman, so I'll just stick her over on the right. And space, of course, works just like your other families, so you can flip things as you place them. And you might be thinking, well, they're okay, but they're just silhouettes. If we go realistic, it does have a version of them. So they're okay, but again, there are only 6, and it's quite hard to add your own, right? Because it's a proprietary format. In other words, well, they're not actually flat. I know they look flat, but when you rotate them, you'll see they do change direction. So I'll just flip around Florence, and we'll see the back of her, or we'll see her facing a different direction. And then again, flip her, and now we see the back. So I'm just flipping around 90 degrees. Now, technically, Elena, you're right. They are flat, but they're made up of a few different flat silhouettes. So they have 3 or 4 different angles built in. So when you rotate and if you make a movie, that's when they're really useful. It will go around them and they do kind of look 3D. But again, because we only have a few and everyone is sick of them, so if you use them in your design presentations, your design teachers will have seen them many times before. So that's the main reason I don't recommend using them. Also, you're just not going to get the variety. So the choice of people in your presentations does matter, and you don't want to choose a style of person. You know, their dress and the demographics and everything should fit with your design. And then even if you have a graphical style of presentation, sometimes it makes more sense to have silhouettes or a stylized person rather than a photoreal person. So all of those things are much easier and just work better in Photoshop. So that's the way I'd recommend that you always add your people unless you're doing animation, really. That's the only time you would maybe think about doing them differently. So even very high-end 3D renders you see done by real professionals, you'll find that they generally add the people in Photoshop the way I'm going to show you now. So I just want to give you that background before we get right into working with people, or essentially what I'm doing here is adding overlays in Photoshop. Something I'm sure you all have a bit of an idea about, but I'm going to show you some techniques that maybe you can use to take it a bit further. So again, I've previously downloaded some of these people that you can see here. So I've got this woman over here. I think she looks reasonable, so I'll use her. And I've got another one. Yeah, these guys up here, I might use them too. So they're very easy to download. If you can find the ones that are true cutouts, it makes it even easier because they have the transparency done for you. But you'll find a lot of them these days don't. They used to be easy to find, the free cutout people, but more and more these guys who make them want you to pay. So you'll find that you often have to cut them out yourself nowadays. But that's okay, I'm going to show you how to do that. So again, back into Photoshop, I'm going to go and open the file that I've saved previously. Maybe I'll just very quickly show you if you're not sure about that at all. Very easy. So let's get a different person. Who do we want? Let's get this guy. Looks interesting. I know he's not his feet are no good though. Here's another one. Here we go. I'll get the woman with the kids. Okay, so again, mrcutout.com is the website for those people, and I'd be pretty sure they'll want you to register and then pay to get the cutout version. I don't want to do that, so I'm simply going to right click on this image up here. The resolution isn't fantastic actually, it's only 370 by 370. So in fact, I think I'm going to get a different one that's maybe a bit better. Here we go, this one's slightly better. If you go and do a better search, you'll find even higher resolution, but I might just see if I can find one more without having to go to the actual website. Yeah, this one's better. Okay, so she is, you can see down there, that's 920 by 1920, which is pretty good resolution. So I'm going to save that one too. So here, I'm going to right click on the image just in Google image search. So right clicking there, we can go save image as. And you just have to go with the format that it's in. You can't change the format down here, right? So you just need to save it with the format that comes up. So you're looking for either JPEGs or PNGs usually. If it's a different format, like that web format that you'll see sometimes, then you sometimes can't use it. So go for those formats if you can. And so I'm just going to our subject folder, sort of save it here. See, it looks like she should be a pretty decent person to use. Yeah, so I'll just call her, what is it? Auburn here, I suppose. So they spell Auburn? No, anyhow. Auburn, U-B-I-N, isn't it? Yeah, Auburn, and yeah, who cares? Auburn here. That'll do. Okay, so then I'll go back to Photoshop. So just checking any questions. Yes, yeah, that's fine. Yep. Okay, so I'll go back and open. I'm actually going to open. I'll come back to you if we get time, but it's always difficult when you've got to go around the hair. So I'm going to open up another one that I had saved previously. So let's just, where did I put it? I think it's here. Yep, okay, so here's one that I got yesterday. Here we go. That's the one I showed you, so I'll use her again. Okay, so we've got this woman that you can see at least has a white background. So what I'll do is use the magic wand, and unless anyone is interested in using the, there's some object select options that you have now, which sometimes can save you a bit of time, but I know that in this case we'd have to adjust it anyway because of the light colors in the image of the person. You'll see in a minute what I mean. So yes, I'll stick with this approach. So again, using the magic wand, you should always check the tolerance when you go to use the magic wand. So you can see there mine's on 20. The default I think is 32. So I'll leave it on that, and then just show you also the default is to have contiguous turned on. So if I click now, you can see it's going to go around and just pick all of the white, but only where it's connected. So you can see that if I zoom in, that it's missed the part under her chin because that's not connected to the outside. So that's what the contiguous option does. So you might think, well, I can just turn contiguous off and then pick that area again, but you can see now it's picked up a lot of areas inside that we don't want selected, like on her face, because that's very pale. So we've got a couple of choices there. We can reduce the tolerance, so I'll take it down to 5. And so then if I pick again, now we've got a better selection, but it's still missing the part under her chin. So I'll take the tolerance up a bit higher to 10. Try again. Still not getting the part under the chin. Now, if we take it up high enough, of course, we're going to get that, but then we'll probably get other things that we don't want. So I'll leave it on 20, and I'll show you another option. You can see now it's starting to get the bits under her chin. Right, so then another option, I'm going to turn contiguous back on. And instead of trying to get it all with one selection, I'm simply going to hold down Shift and then pick on that area under the chin there to add that to my selection. So that's another option. You can always do multiple clicks with the magic wand to keep adding more areas to your selection. Now you can see then that we've got the shoes coming in. We don't want that selected, of course. So I'll take the back down and we'll go in reverse. So this time, instead of holding down Shift to add to the selection, I'm going to hold down Alt to remove from the selection and then try and click on those areas that I don't want. Maybe I've gone a bit too low with 5 for the tolerance. I'll go to 10 and again Alt, and there we are. So that's a bit better. So it's always a bit of a problem when you have light backgrounds and then light areas to select. Anyhow, look, I'm doing it a long way. I'm just wanting to show you how to add and remove from selections. But of course, a lot of you, I'm sure, would have realized that if I select now with the magic wand, so I want to start again with contiguous on, it's going to get the part all around the woman. And then zooming in, I can simply hold down Shift and then click on that part that I want to add to it. Because contiguous is turned on, it's not going to add things like those areas in the shoes because they're of course not connected to what I'm selecting. I think that's a reasonable selection. And so I want to show you how to make a transparency in this file so we can store it. So I'm going to go to layers, and then a good trick with most things you do in Photoshop is to keep the background layer and then copy it to make a new layer that you're actually going to work on. And it's very simple to do. You just simply drag the layer onto the new button at the bottom. And that duplicates the layer. Then I'm going to turn the background off. I don't want to see that. Then I'm simply going to go to the edit menu and choose clear. Okay, so already I've got a pretty good setup for a file that I can then use in lots of other projects. So now I'm going to go to the select menu and then just choose deselect, so nothing is selected. And then we can zoom in and have a bit of a look there. You can see it's actually done a pretty good job going around the edges, but we may need to fine tune that, and I'm going to show you how to do that in when I bring this into the other file. Okay, so I've got this setup that I want, so I'm going to save that. So File, Save As, and I'm going to save it into my, well, let's pretend I've got a library here. So I might make one because I have my library on my server, which I'm not connected to at the moment. So I'll make one right here. So you should be thinking about setting up a library of your own if you haven't already. And then I'll make a folder for people. And then I can keep adding, the people that I make to there, or the people that I set up to there. So now I want to bring this person into my render. So I'm going to go and just use the rectangular marquee in the main toolbar there and just do a selection over her. Go to edit, choose copy, and then switch back to my previous file, go to edit and choose paste. So she's in there, and so I can move her around very easily, just clicking and dragging with the move tool. But she's obviously too big. If she's going to be in that place in the perspective, that's far too large. So I'm going to go to edit and then free transform. So Control T, you can see is a shortcut. Then I can simply scale it down by eye. So the general rule here is you want the eyes to be at around the horizon level. So the horizon is in between these two windows, projecting that across to here. Well, you've got to use your judgment because some people are taller than the person taking the photo. In this case, I think the viewpoint is a bit lower than normal eye level. And so again, just use your judgment there. So that's by eye, I think about the right height. You can also use these windows and other things as a reference because you probably have an idea how high that part of the window is. So that part of the window there, the middle of that, or where the sash goes across there in the middle of that window is, at a guess, I would say around 1600. So we want her eyes probably to be a little bit above that. So I've scaled it to the size I want. We can always adjust that later. And a good way to check if you're not sure, you can always compare that to one of those RPC people that you have in Revit. And that's where they are sometimes useful. So you can see there by placing a person that we probably wouldn't keep. Yeah, so you can see she's probably a little bit shorter than normal, but that gives a better idea. So maybe actually the top of her head should be in line with the sash. So I can just come back to Photoshop now and just scale it down a bit more. So Control T, again, is the shortcut for that free transform, and bring it down a bit. Okay, so she's about the right size. And then you can see, I know it's a little detail, and for your preliminary perspectives, You may not need to be this obsessed with detail, but as you develop your renders further, I know that you'll want to look at these things. And you can see there we've got a bit of a white outline because it wasn't cut out all that perfectly in the original. Now, if I was doing this for my own use, I would probably go back and fix this in the original file. But I just want to show you how to do it here. It's going to be a lot easier to see the changes that I make, and also gives me a good chance to show you another tool in Photoshop that you may not have used called Layer Mask. Okay, so just checking the messages again. Shade. So do you mean shadow or the lighting, Elena?
Yeah, shadow. Sorry.
Shadows, yes, I'm going to show you shadows. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that'll be the next thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So now, because I want to show you shadows, actually, I might move her a bit further back, so we've got more room to add in the shadows. I don't want to. I'm going to be making this void bigger, so I don't want it to be where the void's going to be. So maybe over here. Yeah,
Danny. Hi, Danny. Iraj here.
Yeah. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Just before you move on, what I also
Yeah.
normally do is bring the ruler on from the view menu and then drag a horizontal guideline to create
Oh,
a
yeah. If you want to
eye
show it,
line so
right.
that
Yeah.
then I
Fair
can
enough.
move
Yeah.
up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep. Sure. Yep, so I'll show you that. Okay, so, and this actually relates to what was in the schedule. So it called them construction lines there, but the correct term, as I was just saying, is rulers. So not rulers, they're guidelines. So, but they come up with the rulers. So, so I'll show you that. That's a really good thing. So under window, I'm going to, also not under window, under view, we're going to go to show, and then, oh no, so it's not show. So just under view and then rulers. Right, so I don't really care about the rulers. The rulers give us these measurements which really aren't very useful for a perspective. But what the rulers give us is the option to click and drag from the ruler to bring in a guideline. Okay, and so we can see it's fairly easy here to work out where the horizon is because of the window joinery. So we can see there from the projecting line from that window sash, the horizon probably would be about there. At first, I thought it was actually in line with it, but you can see it's not quite in line with the top of the sash there. It's just a little bit below. Okay, so yeah, so we can see there she's a bit high, right? Because I moved her back. So when she was here, that was a bit right, but you got to remember in perspective, of course, as things get further back, they get smaller. So we move her back, and I'm doing that, so I've got more room to put in the shadows in a second. In fact, I'm going to move over to the other side because then I can, yeah, it's going to be easier to do the shadows.
Yeah, line her up with our eye with the line ruler guide.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Yep. So yeah, so again, we've got to get it into position, and then we'll scale. But then also now it looks a bit odd having her walking in that direction. So before I do too much more, I'm going to flip her. So under edit, I'm just going to go to transform and then flip horizontal. So that's, I think, a bit better, having her walk that direction. And the light, I think, actually works a bit better that way as well. And then now we'll scale her for the new position that she's in. So, so again, it's not going to be, now again, the eye's in line with the horizon. It's a bit of a general rule that people sometimes just apply without thinking about it. You've got to remember that this photo was probably taken, or the view in Revit is probably a bit lower than normal eye level. So I'm going to have her a little bit above. I think she'll look a bit odd. If it's too low, she just looks, you can just tell visually she's too small. So again, it's not always in eye level. Children, obviously, are much shorter than adults. So children will have their eyes much below the horizon. And then people above average height will have their eyes quite a bit away, a bit above the horizon. And but again, the horizon is a very important thing to help you position those things. Okay, so then, okay, so I think she looks a little bit small actually, so I'm going to scale her up. I think it's her feet that need to just be brought down a bit. So the other thing, you've got to still relate it to the other thing. So notice that we've got the balustrade there. Remember, the balustrade is 1 metre high. So her waist would probably be at about 1 metre. So again, I think she needs to be a bit larger. And there we are. So that's a bit better. Her head's, I know, a bit above the horizon, but again, it's more common than you might think, because it's often when people take photos or set up views, they will lower the view position. So in other words, the camera is below eye level. So I think she looks reasonable now. And yeah, so then going over back to the layers, we've got these little white bits going around which make the cutout stand out too much. We don't want that. So again, good chance to look at this great option in Photoshop. And I'm always surprised, people I know who've used Photoshop for years are sometimes a bit too scared of this option. And it's actually one of the most useful things in Photoshop, and not that difficult once you know how to use it. So again, under layer, you have layer masks. You can also get to it in the layers menu. And so I want to show you that as well, because you can see then I've got this layer with the person up the top, because I don't want those adjustments that I made to the render to affect this layer. To go to the bottom, you can see there's a button to add a layer mask there as well. But I'm going to show you on the menu, because then I can also show you when you choose a layer mask, you've got 2 main options, either reveal all and hide all. And I'm going to start with reveal all. That's probably the one I'd recommend you begin with if you are new to layer masks. So with reveal all, everything will be revealed. And then we'll zoom in a little bit more, just so you can see that area that I'm trying to fix up more clearly. So notice in the layers, I've got the thumbnail selected, the white thumbnail, the original layer. I know it's a bit hard to see, but the original layer you can see to the left with the checkerboard pattern, and then the one to the right is the layer mask, that white rectangle. Now I'm just going to change something in my colors, just so that you can see something. I'm just going to pick a random color. So that's something I'm sure you'll do. You all would have done. You set layers, so you set colors in the main toolbar over there, and you have a foreground and a background color, and you can of course change those colors. Right, so that's something you do all the time when you're using other tools in Photoshop. You'll see then when you go to start working with the layer mask, which I'll do now. So I'll switch back to my layer mask, and notice how the colors go back to black and white. So it's really important that you understand that when you're working with layer masks, you work with generally only with black and white. You don't need any other colors, and it automatically switches to those. Then I'm going to switch those colors by clicking on the little angled arrows there to switch black to be the foreground color. Then I'm going to go to the brush tool, and you can see there my brush is fairly small. Yours may not be, so you've got to check your brush size by right clicking. You can see the size, you can drag that, and then you've got the hardness. So I might start with it on full hardness, 100%, so it's as hard as it can be. And then I'm just going to paint more than I want, just so you can see how it works. So I'm going to paint over her legs there, and you can see it's just removing anywhere I paint black, it removes. So I can give her an amputation there, cut her legs off. Not a problem, because again, it's non-destructive editing, just like I showed you with the adjustment layers. I can easily bring that back. So now if I go and paint with white, it brings any of those things that I've covered with the black, brings them right back. So if you can already see how powerful and useful that tool can be. Right, so maybe then to go make some finer adjustments, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to reduce my brush size, but still leave the hardness on 100%. And then I can go in and then just go around. So switching back to paint with black, and then go around here. I don't need to be too precise. We can give her a bit of a diet and cut off any extra parts. Not usually a big problem if you cut off the edge of some people. it's more of a problem if you've got bits left over that you don't want, like the white sticking out. So I can just go around here. No one's going to mind if we cut a few bits of her jacket off. Right, so just getting all of those messy bits. Doesn't take long, and it really ties in the overlays, like the people and the other things that you're adding, ties them right in with the background. Particularly for the things like the hair. So coming around to the hair, right, so you can see there, that would be quite difficult to go around. There's a lot of detail there. So that's when it helps to have a softer brush. So if I reduce the hardness down, right down to, let's say 30%, now I've got a nice soft edge to my brush. Go in around the flat edge. And again, we can give it a bit of a haircut. No one is going to know. Right, so just go around the top there as well. Right, so, oops. Hopefully you can see then how useful layer masks can be. You can do a lot with those, and well, you can see there, it looks like we've got a bit sticking out there from the leg, but it's not. It's just the wall that's behind her. And so that's actually the edge of the jacket there. So now I want to move the whole thing across. Notice that you've got this little linking symbol between the layer and the layer mask. There's that symbol in between. That means the two things are linked. So if I move one, the other one goes with it. So the layer mask goes with the layer. So now I want to go a bit further and use a similar approach to add in reflections and shadows. So I'm going to go back to the original layer and show you one of these great little secrets in Photoshop. Well, it's not really a secret, but a lot of people don't know. When you right click on a layer, you can choose the option select pixels. So that's a really quick way of selecting the person. Right, so I selected all the pixels on that layer. And then I'm going to make a new layer. And I better give my layers some more meaningful names. So I'll call layer 1 now person. Oops. Person. Alert person 1. And then this new layer. Sorry. There we go. I'm going to call person 1 shadows. And then drag that under the person 1 layer. Okay, so then I'm going to go to edit and then fill and just make it black. So you can see the contents I've just left on black. The paint bucket works here as well, but I don't want to show you all the options with the paint bucket. So edit fill always works really well. And so then just so you can see what I've got now, I'm going to just turn off the layer above so you can see we just got a black filled layer there. And so now I want to go and again, free transform under edit. And I'm just going to zoom out and actually they've changed the shortcuts. So here I'm clicking and dragging from the top there, but I've had to hold down shift to get it to go straight down. And I'm going to have to make some other little adjustments, but that's probably okay for now. I'm going to stretch it and, oh, now actually here, so this one, so the shadow I did before was down. This one's actually going to be back. So I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm just going to go to about there. This one's actually going to be easy because it's in the same direction. So there, I'm basically on the shadows that you can see from the stairs there to the left. So now I want it to go skewed to the left. So I'm going to hold down Control and then click and drag on that little thing to get a skewed shadow. Okay, and then we can keep scaling it. So here I'm just holding down Shift again. I don't want to have the shadows go as far as the wall. And there we are. So it's never going to be perfect because well, it's not projecting a 3D shadow. So I'm just going to get that as close as I can by eye. And I'm going to show you in a minute then how we can make some adjustments. So that's, I think that's good enough. Never try to make the shadows too perfect because they're all going to be blurred and faded anyway. So close enough is good enough. So I'm happy with that shape. So I'll click tick to finish. And then before I blur it and fade it, I want the feet to be a bit better. Right, so I've shown you can use layer masks to hide things, but here all I'm going to do is erase the parts that I want to get rid of. So I might use the eraser. And I don't even need to deselect there. I can just paint over those areas just to get rid of those. Doesn't hurt to have a soft edge brush, but here it really doesn't matter because it's all going to be faded in the end anyway. So I'm just trying to think about how her feet would go. It's a bit odd, this one, but that's probably... In fact, I'm going to deselect just so I don't see the marching ants distracting me. So again, I'm going to go to select and then deselect. And, well, yeah, so I've got a bit more erasing to do there, but maybe I could paint in a bit more just to make it look a bit more like the real shadow would be. Just trying to think how this would actually go. It's a bit odd having the angle in the same direction her feet are. Still, it's not too bad actually, the way it is. Yeah, I'll probably live with it. Maybe just find this. Maybe I'll actually harden that brush up just because at the moment it's got a hard edge. And then I definitely don't want this shadow sticking out over here, so I'll erase that. And that might be okay. Maybe just, oops, sorry. Maybe I'll just paint in some more black. So I'll go to the brush tool and then switch it to paint with black and white using that little small icon you've got there, which is made just to do that, to put it back to black and white. And just paint in a bit more black there, maybe just guessing about how the feet would cast some shadows. Don't get too fussy though, because again, it's all going to be fairly faded in the end. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to get a bit of a fade, which is what happens in real life. In real life, when a shadow is cast over a distance, you'll see it gets less intense the further away it is from the object. So an easy way to do that now is with a gradient. And so for that, I'm going to show you a great little option. You can go to add a layer mask on top of this layer. So again, layer mask, reveal all, and then add the gradient with that. So I've gone the wrong way. So I'll just, I don't even need to undo it. I'm just going to go and do a gradient now going the other way. And there we are. So that's a bit too strong. So I'll just do it a bit more close to the, where the shadow starts and ends. Sorry, actually, no, I'll go further out. That's better. Okay, so you can see there, the gradient now is fading from the back to the front. That's getting there. Now you can soften the edges if you really want to. You can do feathering and things like that. But I think here, as long as I then fade the whole thing, and for that, I'm going to go back and choose the original layer, and then go to opacity and just drag that down. That's already okay. You can also blur if you go to the filter menu. Blurring sometimes helps. You can go and just choose blur or blur more. And you can see there that's made it look a bit more like a shadow with soft edges. And then there is one other thing. So, oh yeah, so then also you can maybe see it's a bit of a subtle thing, but the colors from the floorboards aren't coming through perfectly. So something that can help, it's not always necessary, but it sometimes can help to change the blend mode for this layer from normal to multiply. It's going to be quite subtle here because the layer has opacity, so you don't really need to use multiply here, but you'll see a lot of people just do that out of habit. It's usually a good thing, but again, I don't think it's really essential here. So that's good enough for the shadows. And then I'm going to essentially use a similar process. In fact, I'm going to fade that even more. You can see this shadow is too strong compared to the stairs, so I'm going to reduce that even more. So we'll just reduce that opacity now even further. The shadow should be fairly subtle. Yeah. Why is it making a noise? There we are. Okay, so now I'll do the reflection. And this is a very reflective floor, so we definitely would want reflections here. So back to the original person layer. Again, right click, select pixels. And this time, oh no, sorry, I'm just going to duplicate the whole layer. So to do that, just remember again, as before, I'm going to drag this layer now onto my new layer button to get an exact copy of this layer. Then I will, I'm going to remove the mask from my new layer. So we'll just delete by right clicking, delete layer mask. So I've got now person one copy, which is going to become person one reflections. And again, we'll drag this under the person one layer. And then I've got my selection already. So I'm going to then just go to edit, free transform, hold down shift, and then again, click and drag this time to drag her down. Now here you'll see you do often need to make adjustments to get a proper reflection. So not everything, if her feet were closer together, it would be easier, but we can always make some adjustments to make this work. Okay, so right, so there you can see I've dragged the first foot up so that it's touching the other one. And then using control, I can try skewing and see if that helps me. I think it's good enough actually. Yeah, so with skew, I think I'm going to get something that's pretty good actually. Just bring this down even more and keep skewing. I think that's going to do it. Oops. Yeah, so again, with things like this, close enough is good enough. Okay, so I've got my reflection. I think that's we can set the, sometimes setting it to multiply helps, but you find with reflections, multiply doesn't always look that good. So I find with this that if you just flick through all the different blend modes, so here I've started on dissolve, which I don't want, but I'm going to then press the down arrow and just go through and see if any of these blends give me a good result. Lighten, I think is reasonable there. Screen, light and color, that's a good one here as well. Keep going down. So you'd be surprised sometimes. Different blends work in different situations. Depends on the material that it's being reflected on as well. So I think here the best one was that light and color. Soft light's often a good one too. Soft light actually is pretty good there, I think. But yeah, light and color I think is the one that's working the best. And then again, you still can adjust the opacity to reduce the strength of that reflection. So now if I take the marching ants away, in other words, deselect on the select menu, then you can see, I think that looks reasonable. Good enough. You're not trying to create photograph type reality. As long as it gives an indication and ties the person into the space, I think with the shadows and the reflections now, she's fairly well anchored. And normally you'd want the shadows actually to be on top of the reflection layer. So I drag the reflection under the shadows. In this case, it won't make a huge difference because the shadows and the reflections are fairly separate anyway. So that's the bulk of it, but then I'm going to show you one other kind of shadow. And this will not just help you with Photoshop, but also maybe give you a better understanding of the way light works. Okay, so going now to the shadows layer, right? I'm going to make another layer above that, and I'll call this person AO, or I'll just put shadows so you know what it is. But normally I'll just put AO. AO means ambient occlusion. So these are the ambient shadows that I'm going to paint, and there's something that you will see all the time. And if you're wondering why you can't get, or you don't, with the simple, it's often because you don't have these extra ambient shadows. So they're a really nice thing to add, and they add a lot of depth and realism to all of the views that you ever do with shadows. So all I've done here is again go to the brush tool, and I might just reduce the size a little bit and make sure it's a fairly soft brush, or very soft brush actually. And then I'm simply going to paint in black, little black edges around the feet. So wherever surfaces meet, that's where you get these ambient shadows. And just look around in the room that you're in, you will see in the corners or anywhere that you have a table leg touching the floor or anything where surfaces are connected, you'll always get these ambient shadows, because essentially the light has more trouble reaching the corners than it does to the main surface. Okay, so I've gone too far there with this one, so I'll just erase a little bit of that. Okay, so just tidy that up just where her feet touch the ground, so I don't want this to be too big. It's a subtle thing, but it really helps a lot. So, okay, so there you can see I've got my ambient shadows. Maybe I'll make them a little bit larger so they stand out a bit more. So the key with ambient shadows, keep them soft, and usually they work best by you painting them in. There are some automatic options to do them in Photoshop, but they don't work very well. So I find manually putting in shadows like this works a lot better. And just like all the other things, all the other shadows especially, I'm going to fade them using opacity. So it's the same, but you'll find it adds a lot of connection to your objects in rendered views especially. And I'm also going to set this one to multiply. Now, it stands out a little bit because the shoes have these white edges, so I can still go and tidy that up now, back to the person layer, to the layer mask for that layer, and I'll then just continue using that to, oh God, this is so annoying. So zoom here. Okay, so yeah, so then I'm just going to keep removing, sorry, I'm painting with the wrong colors now. So I'm on the layer mask. Why is it not going to my colors? There we go. So I'm going to be painting in black. There we are. So you can see now when I get those white edges taken away from the shoes, that the shadows now are connected much better to the feet. So again, subtle little thing, but you can see now hopefully when I zoom out, those feet look a lot more connected to the floor. Maybe the shadows need to be faded a little bit more, but I'll show you what that's without. Right, and then you can see when they're back there now how much better it is. So again, without, with. So subtle little things that really help to tie things together. Right, but also if you try those techniques, you're going to learn a lot about tools that you use for lots of different things in Photoshop as well. So now to finish off, firstly, I'll just save this file because I don't want it to crash now. So as always, I'm going to save as and make sure it's a Photoshop file, a PSD file. Okay, so now my new renders should be done. So I'll start with the one, oh, did I stop it from Revit? Okay, I'll just set that one going again, but I've got one that's been saved already, so I'll go and grab that. So I'll just go and open the new render. Here we go. So this is the new render that I did in Revit. So now I want to bring this into Photoshop. And then, so I need to select it. So on the select menu, I'm just going to go to select all. Under edit, I'll go to copy. Then I'm going to go to my Photoshop file, and in layers, make sure I know where I'm at. So I'm going to choose the background layer there. So that's obviously the layer I started with. And then I'll simply go to edit and choose paste. And it's going to bring in the new render. Lined up perfectly because it was rendered the same way. Then I'm going to turn off the background layer. So now if it isn't clear to you, all of those adjustment layers are affecting this new layer. So that's another reason it's very helpful to have adjustment layers. And also you can see, of course, the person stays there because she's over the top of that layer. So I'll change this new layer to, let's call it new render. So then let's say I want to put in a sky background. So I'll go and grab one that I've saved previously. So just like before, let's show you. So you can search for your own sky backgrounds. You'll find literally millions of them. People are always taking photos of the sky. So if you search for sky background, you'll find, or just sky even. Go for your life there. You'll find thousands of them easily. In fact, maybe I will get a new one. I've got a few saved, but I'll just grab a new one. So let's get a morning type sky, because that's the sort of render I've got. Yeah, I want one that's a reasonable size, so I'm going to change the settings up here. Sorry, under tools you've got it. You can change the size. Just go for large. And that should give me better quality skies. What do we want? I was trying to think what I'll see through the windows. Unfortunately, higher res does not always mean better quality, because you can see some of these are a bit grainy, even though they've got a lot of pixels. They're still not the greatest quality, some of them. So you just got to be careful with that. Yeah, maybe this one's got a lot of cloud, so that should be interesting. Okay, so I'm going to, it's got a watermark, unfortunately, so I won't do that. What's this one? Another one with the watermark. It's so painful. The people who make these watermarks are usually the least knowledgeable about software, and they've got very few skills to pass on, which is why I suppose they're trying to make money off stuff that anyone can do. But yeah, it really annoys me having these people doing this watermark stuff. Anyhow, we just have to put up with it. And so I found one now without a watermark, so I'll save image as, and then again, just save it like I did before. And then now back into Photoshop, just like I did with the person, I'll open that file. And did I save it there? Where did I save it? I thought I saved it there. Oh, I saved it in the folder above, I think. Yeah. Okay, and there we are. So there's that format I mentioned. Oh no, this is not, sorry, that one's okay. So, but yeah, I was worried that that might have been the format that can cause some problems. Oh yes, it is. Yeah, okay, so watch out, I didn't check that, but that's good. So you can see that. So when I went to save the image, I didn't look closely at the format. I'm sure it's this web format, which is difficult to use. Yeah, see this WebP file, watch out for those. It is image format, but it's harder to use. You can't open them with Photoshop. So I'll just get a different sky. That one's a bit ordinary. Let's get something better. Here we go. So right click there, save image as, and again, hope it's not a WebP. Yeah, and look, there are people who provide these things that you can pay and do give you very good quality skies, but the ones that are really good, you've got to pay a lot for those. The ones that just charge you a little bit are usually pretty rubbish, and you'll find better just by searching like I am now. And of course, now it's just frozen. I've just got to wait for it. But also just think about taking your own photos. I'm sure you can all go out and take a photo of the sky, and you probably can get a better quality one than a lot of these that you'll find online. Chrome. Worst browser on the planet in many ways, but I know we're stuck with it because everyone thinks it's awesome and everyone uses it now. But Chrome is a horrible memory hog, and if you're wondering why your computer crashes all the time, it's usually Chrome. Here we go, it's crashed. That sucks. Okay, so I'll I'll go back and I'll use one of the skies that I've saved previously. Okay, so I'm just going to open up a file that I'd already saved. I've got a few here. Well, actually, I'll tell you what, I'm going to use that one that's a web BP file. I'm going to show you how you can actually get to use it. It's not that difficult. God, Chrome. Now it's even stopping me from opening other things. Because it's trying to use the cloud and I'm on the VPN. So I have to give it a minute. It will come back. Okay, so while that's happening, I'm going to check Revit. All getting crashed, so I'm going to just try to cancel this. Should have only been a little thing. Putting in the background normally is very, very easy. But I can't even switch back to Teams right now. Let's see. Teams, yep, still not responding. So if anyone can still hear me, let me know. God, okay.
It's freezing, Danny.
Yeah, I know. Mine's it's completely frozen. I'm just waiting for some of the programs to respond. I can't even switch back to Teams at the moment. Okay, so this is all frozen, unfortunately. Just have to wait for it. Okay, so I've stopped sharing my screen. I think that's going to help it. And yeah, that's come back suddenly. So it was Teams. Okay. Alrighty. So I think it's these Adobe things as well, though, because I've got Acrobat now giving me an error. Chrome, Photoshop, they're all crashing. Okay, so I'm just going to stop the recording there and I'll start a new one once this is all working again.